Just a secretary? My sister mocked me in the company meeting, then my billionaire boss heard my name, Viper 6. The conference room on the top floor of Vincent Global Tower overlooked the glittering skyline of New York City. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows reflected the afternoon sun, while polished marble floors and a 40-foot walnut table reminded everyone inside that only the most powerful people in the country were invited to sit here. Billion-dollar contracts had been signed in this room. Fortune 500 companies had been bought and sold across this very table. Today, another meeting was about to begin. No one in that room realized they were only minutes away from witnessing a secret that had been buried for 5 years. If you've ever seen someone judged because of their appearance, if you've ever watched the quietest person in the room get treated like they didn't belong, stay with me. Because today's story proves that sometimes the most dangerous person isn't the one making the loudest noise, they're the ones saying absolutely nothing. Eva Clark stood silently behind the chairman's seat with a leather notebook pressed against her chest. Dressed in a simple charcoal gray business suit, her dark hair was neatly tied back into a low ponytail. She wore no expensive jewelry, no designer watch, nothing that suggested wealth or influence. To everyone else in the room, she looked exactly like what her employee badge claimed she was. Executive secretary. Her job seemed painfully ordinary. Take notes. Schedule meetings. Prepare documents. Serve coffee when necessary. That was all anyone believed she could do. Her expression remained calm as board members filed into the room one after another. Investors representing defense contractors, aerospace companies, cybersecurity firms, and government partners exchanged confident handshakes while assistants placed thick proposal folders in front of every seat. Eva quietly checked the agenda. Quarterly Defense Technology Partnership Review. Estimated duration: 3 hours. She placed a glass of water beside the chairman's chair before taking her usual position a respectful distance behind it. Not once did she try to draw attention to herself. She never needed to. A few moments later, the double doors opened again. Michael Vincent walked inside. Even among billionaires, his name carried extraordinary weight. Founder and CEO of Vincent Defense Technologies. One of the youngest self-made billionaires in America. A trusted contractor working alongside multiple federal agencies. His company developed advanced military surveillance systems worth billions of dollars. Every person around the table stood up the moment he entered. Every person. Except Eva. She simply gave a polite nod. Michael noticed. His eyes rested on her for only a fraction of a second before he returned the same respectful nod. No one else paid attention to that tiny exchange. To everyone watching, it meant absolutely nothing. The meeting officially began. Charts appeared on the massive digital screen covering one side of the conference room. Revenue projections. Defense contracts. Artificial intelligence integration. Satellite communication upgrades. Each executive presented numbers with polished confidence. Eva listened quietly while writing short notes in her notebook. She never interrupted. Never offered an opinion. Never even looked bored. About 40 minutes into the meeting, Michael leaned back slightly. Our final proposal today, he said calmly, comes from Anderson Strategic Consulting. The doors opened once more. A woman wearing a tailored white designer suit entered with confident steps. Sarah Clark. She carried herself like someone who believed she already owned the room. Perfect makeup. Diamond earrings. Luxury handbag. Everything about her screamed success. She smiled confidently as several board members greeted her. Sarah was known throughout New York's corporate circles as one of the city's fastest-rising business consultants. She had built a reputation for delivering aggressive expansion strategies to major defense suppliers. She also happened to be Eva's older sister. The difference between them couldn't have been greater. Sarah loved attention. Eva avoided it. Sarah believed success should always be visible. Eva believed real success rarely needed an audience. As Sarah approached the presentation screen, her eyes casually scanned the room. Then, they landed on Eva. Her smile changed instantly. Not into happiness. Into amusement. The kind of smile only someone carrying years of unresolved jealousy could wear. She looked Eva up and down before letting out a soft laugh. "So," Sarah said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "you're still doing office work?" Several executives looked toward Eva. Eva simply smiled politely. "Good afternoon, Sarah." Sarah ignored the greeting. "I heard you finally found a stable job." Another executive chuckled quietly. "I suppose taking meeting notes is still better than having no career at all." A few people laughed under their breath. Eva didn't react. She simply opened a fresh page in her notebook. Sarah shook her head dramatically. "You've always been like this. Too quiet. Too ordinary. No ambition. I honestly thought you'd disappear somewhere after college." Silence. Eva kept writing. That irritated Sarah even more. Their rivalry hadn't started yesterday. It had existed almost their entire lives. Growing up, Sarah had always been the family's golden child. Straight A student. Debate champion. Scholarships. Awards. Their parents proudly displayed Sarah's trophies across the living room. Meanwhile, Eva rarely spoke about herself. She disappeared for long periods after college, offering vague explanations about government work that no one in the family ever understood. When relatives asked where she worked, she simply answered, "Administrative services." No company name. No details. No photographs. Nothing. Eventually, everyone assumed she had failed to achieve anything meaningful. Including Sarah. Especially Sarah. Over the years, Sarah turned that assumption into certainty. Every family gathering became another opportunity to compare their lives. "My clients fly me to Washington every month. I just bought another apartment. I closed another 8-figure deal. And what about you, Eva? Still answering emails? Still organizing calendars?" Eva always smiled. Something like that. She never argued. Never defended herself. Never corrected anyone. Today seemed no different. Sarah connected her laptop to the presentation screen while continuing to throw casual insults over her shoulder. "You know, Mr. Vincent," she said with a playful laugh, "it's honestly nice that your company gives people like my sister a chance. Everyone deserves employment, even if they're only qualified to organize coffee orders." A few board members smiled awkwardly. Others looked away. Michael Vincent remained completely expressionless. Eva quietly closed her notebook and looked toward the skyline outside the enormous glass windows. Her reflection stared back at her. Calm. Controlled. Unreadable. As if Sarah's words meant absolutely nothing. But hidden beneath the cuff of Eva's left sleeve, a small black snake tattoo rested silently against her wrist. Almost invisible. Almost forgotten. And before this meeting was over, that tiny mark would make one of the most powerful billionaires in America rise from his chair in absolute shock. Sarah took a slow breath before beginning her presentation, wearing the confident smile of someone who believed every pair of eyes in the room belonged to her. The lights dimmed slightly as the giant screen behind her came to life. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," she began smoothly. "Today, Anderson Strategic Consulting is proud to present a defense logistics expansion model that has the potential to reduce operational costs by nearly 18% over the next 5 fiscal years." Graphs filled the screen. Financial projections. Supply chain maps. Military transportation routes. Several board members nodded with interest while others flipped through the printed reports in front of them. Michael Vincent listened without interruption, his hands folded neatly on the table. Eva remained exactly where she had been standing. Quiet. Still. Writing occasional notes whenever Michael asked her to record a decision. To everyone else, she looked invisible. Halfway through the presentation, Sarah switched to another slide and confidently explained how her consulting firm intended to modernize emergency response logistics for military contractors. When she finished, polite applause echoed around the conference room. Excellent work, one investor commented. Very impressive numbers. I like the projected savings. Sarah smiled proudly. Thank you. She looked toward Michael. I'd be honored to answer any questions. Michael slowly closed the report in front of him. There is one. Sarah straightened immediately. Of course. Michael tapped one finger against the table. Your logistics model assumes uninterrupted satellite communication during hostile electronic warfare. Correct. And if satellite coverage is compromised? Sarah hesitated. Our backup communication network. Michael interrupted calmly. It depends on commercial infrastructure. Yes. What happens if commercial infrastructure is destroyed? Sarah paused again. It would certainly create delays, but soldiers die during delays. The room became noticeably quieter. Sarah forced a smile. We believe the probability is extremely low. Michael didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced over several pages before closing the file again. I asked because the proposal ignores contingency protocols used during classified operations. Sarah cleared her throat. Those protocols aren't publicly available. No, Michael replied. They aren't. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Before Sarah could recover, another board member leaned forward. Overall, it's still a strong proposal. Several executives agreed. Sarah relaxed slightly. Then she noticed Eva writing something in her notebook. Sarah frowned. What exactly are you writing? Eva looked up politely. Meeting notes. Sarah laughed. I hope you're keeping up. A few people smiled. You probably don't understand half of what's being discussed anyway. Eva answered with the same calm voice she'd used all morning. My job is simply to record the discussion. Sarah folded her arms. Exactly. She turned toward the room. This is why I always tell people titles matter. She gestured toward Eva without even looking at her. Some people lead billion-dollar negotiations. She pointed at herself. And some people write down what the important people say. Several executives exchanged awkward glances. The joke felt unnecessary. But no one challenged her. Sarah mistook their silence for approval. You know, she continued with a smug smile, Eva was always like this growing up. Our parents used to tell her she needed confidence. She never had any. I remember she couldn't even stand in front of a classroom without getting nervous. A quiet laugh escaped one investor. Sarah continued. I was winning debate competitions. She was hiding in libraries. I built a career. She became. Sarah looked directly at Eva. An assistant. The word hung in the air like an insult. Eva didn't flinch. She simply turned another page in her notebook. That irritated Sarah more than any argument could have. She wanted embarrassment. She wanted tears. She wanted Eva to defend herself. Instead, nothing. Michael had remained silent through the exchange. But something had changed. His eyes had shifted away from Sarah's presentation entirely. Instead, He found himself watching Eva. Not because of the insults. Because of the way she carried herself. There was something strangely familiar about her posture. Perfectly balanced. Always aware of every movement in the room. She never leaned against the wall. Never crossed her feet. Never allowed anyone to stand behind her unnoticed. Those weren't habits learned in corporate offices. Those were survival instincts. Michael narrowed his eyes. Where had he seen that before? His thoughts drifted back several years. Afghanistan. A classified Pentagon briefing. Rows of officers studying photographs that disappeared minutes later. One image had stayed in his memory longer than the others. Not a face. Just a silhouette. A field operative standing with the exact same posture. Impossible. He dismissed the thought. Thousands of people stood like that. It meant nothing. The meeting continued. Another board member asked Sarah about cybersecurity implementation. She answered confidently. Then another investor questioned projected procurement costs. Again, Sarah responded smoothly. Her confidence returned. She smiled toward Michael. I believe this strategy positions Vincent Defense Technologies ahead of every competitor in the industry. Michael nodded politely. Perhaps. Sarah's smile widened. Then Michael spoke again. Eva. Every head turned. It was the first time anyone had heard the billionaire address his secretary directly during the meeting. Yes, sir. Eva replied. The notes you're taking. Yes? Would you summarize the weaknesses you've observed in this proposal? The room froze. Sarah blinked. One executive nearly dropped his pen. Another whispered, why would he ask her? Sarah laughed. Mr. Vincent. I'm sure she wouldn't be comfortable doing that. Michael didn't even look at Sarah. I asked Eva. Silence. Eva slowly closed her notebook. For the first time since the meeting had begun. She stepped away from the wall. Her expression remained calm. Respectful. Professional. I don't believe it's my place to critique a consultant during a board meeting, she said gently. Michael's eyes remained fixed on hers. What if I make it your place? Sarah folded her arms confidently. She wasn't worried. After all, how could an executive secretary possibly find flaws that a room full of investors and defense specialists had missed? Around the conference table, curious faces turned toward Eva. No one realized that the quiet woman they had ignored for the past hour had spent years planning operations where a single mistake could cost dozens of lives. Eva looked down at her notebook one last time. Then she slowly raised her eyes. With your permission, Mr. Vincent. I've identified 7 critical flaws. The silence that followed was so complete that even the sound of the city's traffic, hundreds of feet below the glass windows, suddenly felt loud. Eva's words seemed to drain every sound from the conference room. I've identified 7 critical flaws. For a moment, nobody moved. Several executives looked at one another, wondering if they had heard her correctly. Sarah let out a short, sarcastic laugh. 7. She slowly shook her head. This should be entertaining. One of the investors leaned back in his chair with crossed arms. Another quietly closed his laptop. Everyone's attention shifted toward the woman they had ignored for the last hour. Michael Vincent remained completely still. His expression revealed nothing. Go ahead, he said calmly. Eva gave a respectful nod. She didn't walk to the front of the room. She didn't ask for the presentation remote. She simply opened her notebook. The first issue, she said in a steady voice, is the assumption that civilian communication infrastructure will remain available after a coordinated cyber attack. Sarah immediately interrupted. Our research shows 93% operational availability. Eva nodded politely. It does. But your research is based on peacetime conditions. She looked around the room. Military operations are never planned around peacetime. Several board members stopped writing. Eva continued. If hostile actors disable both satellite communication and regional fiber networks simultaneously, your emergency logistics chain collapses within 31 minutes. One executive frowned. 31? Eva looked toward him. Based on average deployment speed and response intervals, yes. The executive quickly grabbed Sarah's report. His eyes widened. She's right. Sarah's confident smile faded slightly. Eva turned another page. The second flaw. She spoke without hesitation. Your transportation routes rely on two primary interstate corridors. Sarah crossed her arms. Those are the fastest routes. They are. Eva agreed. They're also the easiest to predict. She looked toward the digital map. If an enemy wanted to delay military equipment, those highways would become the first targets. Another investor leaned forward. I never considered that. Michael remained silent. Watching. Listening. Evaluating. Eva continued. Third. Your supply chain depends on 3 overseas manufacturers. Sarah answered quickly. They're our most reliable suppliers. Eva nodded. Until geopolitical sanctions begin. The room fell quiet again. If international shipping pauses for even 10 days. She looked directly at Sarah. Your production capacity falls below operational demand. One of the finance directors began calculating numbers on his tablet. Less than a minute later. He slowly looked up. My God. Someone across the table asked quietly. Is that accurate? The finance director swallowed. Even worse. If those factories stop shipping, we lose nearly 40% of projected output. A murmur spread around the room. Sarah's confidence was slipping. But she refused to show it. She forced a smile. These are only hypothetical situations. Eva answered immediately. So were the attacks on Pearl Harbor. Silence. So were September 11th. Nobody spoke. Eva's voice remained calm. History is filled with disasters that experts once called unlikely. Michael's fingers slowly tapped against the table. Not because he disagreed. Because he was impressed. Very impressed. Eva turned another page. The fourth flaw concerns evacuation timing. She pointed toward one of Sarah's charts. This model assumes every wounded soldier reaches extraction within 12 minutes. Sarah nodded confidently. That's the military standard. Eva looked at her. No. It isn't. The room became perfectly still. It is the training standard. The battlefield standard is whatever reality allows. She paused. I've never seen reality follow a schedule. No one noticed Michael staring at Eva more intensely now. Not at her words. At her choice of language. I've never seen reality follow a schedule. Not. Military analysts say. Not. According to government reports. She had spoken from experience. Personal experience. Michael's thoughts drifted back once again. Years earlier. A classified debriefing. A report describing an unidentified field operative. One sentence suddenly echoed inside his mind. Agent refused extraction until every hostage had been evacuated. Another sentence. Estimated survival probability, under 5%. Michael unconsciously clenched his jaw. No. It couldn't be. Could it? Meanwhile. Eva continued. The fifth issue. She pointed toward another slide. Your cybersecurity architecture protects external threats. Sarah interrupted. Exactly. It doesn't protect internal compromise. Eva replied. A cybersecurity director slowly looked at the chart. Then his face changed. He looked toward Sarah. We. He hesitated. Actually don't have insider breach protocols integrated. Another executive whispered. How did we miss that? Sarah quickly answered. We plan to add that during phase 2. Eva smiled politely. Unfortunately, attackers rarely wait for phase 2. Even Michael couldn't hide the faintest hint of a smile. Several board members quietly lowered their eyes. The room no longer viewed Eva as a secretary. Now, they were trying to understand who she really was. Eva continued. The sixth flaw. She looked around the room. Your threat analysis assumes rational opponents. Nobody answered. She continued. Modern terrorist organizations don't always pursue military victory. They pursue psychological impact. If damaging one bridge creates nationwide panic, they'll destroy the bridge instead of attacking the convoy. Silence. One retired general sitting on the board slowly nodded. She's absolutely correct. Sarah looked toward him in disbelief. You agree with her? The general answered without emotion. I've seen that strategy used overseas. Sarah's face turned pale. There was only 1 point remaining. The seventh flaw. Eva closed her notebook. Is the most dangerous. Nobody even blinked. She looked directly at Sarah. You built this proposal assuming the enemy thinks the way we do. She let the sentence hang in the air. They don't. They study us. They learn our procedures. They wait until we become predictable. Then she quietly added. And predictable organizations don't lose contracts. They lose lives. Complete silence. No applause. No whispers. No movement. Only the distant hum of New York traffic beyond the glass windows. For nearly 10 seconds. No one spoke. Then, the retired 4-star general serving as an independent advisor slowly removed his reading glasses. I've reviewed defense proposals for over 30 years. He looked at Eva. And I've never heard a civilian analyze battlefield logistics like that. Several heads nodded. The finance director quietly closed Sarah's presentation. The cybersecurity chief lowered his eyes. Even the investors who had laughed only minutes earlier now looked genuinely uncomfortable. Sarah felt every pair of eyes turning toward her. For the first time in years. She had nothing to say. Michael Vincent slowly stood from his chair. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Deliberately. His gaze never left Eva. There was no doubt anymore. The precision. The calmness. The operational mindset. The language. The awareness. Every instinct inside him screamed the same impossible conclusion. But he needed one final confirmation. Just one. His eyes drifted toward Eva's left hand. As she reached forward to place her notebook on the table. The sleeve of her jacket slid back slightly. For the first time. A small black snake tattoo became visible on the inside of her wrist. Michael's heartbeat stopped for what felt like an entire second. Michael Vincent stared at the tiny black snake tattoo as though the entire room had suddenly disappeared. His breathing slowed. The conversations. The presentations. The board members. The billion-dollar contracts. None of them mattered anymore. His eyes remained locked on that small mark hidden beneath Eva's sleeve. A mark almost no one else would recognize. But he did. Because 5 years earlier, he had seen that exact symbol in a classified Pentagon briefing that officially never existed. His fingers tightened around the edge of the conference table. Impossible. No. Not impossible. Unbelievable. His mind was suddenly flooded with memories he had spent years trying to forget. A secure military facility outside Washington. No phones. No recordings. Every officer inside the room had surrendered their security clearance cards before entering. A senior intelligence commander had stood before a giant digital screen displaying only one image. A black snake. Underneath it, one code name. Viper 6. No photograph. No real name. No age. No gender. Only a warning. If you ever encounter this operative, you will not ask questions. You will not interfere. And under no circumstances will you reveal their identity. Even the highest-ranking officers had remained silent. Michael remembered asking one simple question. Has anyone ever actually met Viper 6? The commander had answered without hesitation. Only people cleared above Omega level. Michael wasn't one of them. He never learned another detail. Only rumors. Rumors that spread quietly through military circles. Some claimed Viper 6 had dismantled an international weapons network without firing a single shot. Others believed the operative had infiltrated terrorist organizations for years using multiple identities. Some insisted Viper 6 had died during a classified operation. Others whispered. No one even knew whether Viper 6 was a man or a woman. The government had never confirmed anything. Until now. Michael slowly looked up from the tattoo. To Eva's face. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't trying to hide it. She simply noticed where he was looking. For the briefest moment, their eyes met. Eva understood immediately. He knew. She quietly adjusted her sleeve, covering the tattoo once again. No panic. No surprise. Only quiet acceptance. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Sarah noticed the strange silence. Mr. Vincent? No answer. She smiled awkwardly. Is everything all right? Still nothing. The room had become strangely tense. Board members looked between Michael and Eva, completely confused by what they were witnessing. One executive whispered to another. What is he looking at? I have no idea. Sarah forced another laugh. If this is about her little speech. She shrugged. I'll admit she did more homework than I expected. Michael finally spoke. His voice was calm. Almost too calm. Sarah. She smiled confidently. Yes? Who did you say she was? Sarah frowned. My younger sister. Michael asked again. And professionally? Sarah rolled her eyes. My secretary-loving little sister. An executive assistant. Someone who couldn't keep up with the rest of us. A few nervous laughs escaped around the table. Michael didn't smile. He slowly walked around the conference table. Every step echoed across the marble floor. Nobody understood why America's youngest billionaire looked more unsettled with each passing second. He stopped only a few feet away from Eva. She remained standing exactly as before. Notebook in one hand. Completely relaxed. Michael searched her face carefully. Not for recognition. For confirmation. Finally. He spoke so quietly that several people had to lean forward to hear him. May I ask you something? Eva gave a polite nod. If you wish. Michael hesitated. He had never imagined asking this question. Not in a corporate boardroom. Not to his own secretary. But there was no turning back now. 5 years ago. His voice became even quieter. Portland Military Base. Eva's expression didn't change. Michael continued. Operation Black Horizon. The room fell completely silent. Several retired military officers exchanged confused glances. Those words meant nothing to most people present. They had never heard of Operation Black Horizon. Because officially, it had never happened. Michael watched Eva carefully. If those names mean nothing to you, I'll apologize immediately. Eva remained silent. For nearly 5 seconds. Then, she smiled very faintly. The official name was never Black Horizon. Michael's heartbeat accelerated. She continued. That was the media's guess after fragments of classified reports leaked. Michael swallowed. The operation's internal designation. She looked directly into his eyes. Was Eclipse 7. The color drained from Michael's face. No civilian could possibly know that. The operation had been classified at the highest level. Even most Pentagon personnel had never heard its real designation. One retired general at the table slowly stood up. What did she just say? Another director looked completely lost. What operation are they talking about? Michael didn't answer anyone. His attention never left Eva. You. His voice almost failed him. Were there. Eva remained quiet. Michael took another slow breath. I lost 38 men in that region. My convoy was surrounded. The rescue helicopters couldn't reach us. He paused. There were 50 hostages. The room had become so silent that every word echoed against the glass walls. Michael's eyes grew distant as the memories returned. We believed everyone was going to die. He looked down briefly. I accepted it. Several board members stared at him in disbelief. They had never heard their billionaire CEO speak like this. His voice carried something unfamiliar. Emotion. Raw. Unfiltered. Michael slowly looked back at Eva. Then, he smiled sadly. Someone appeared. No identification. No military insignia. No name. Only a radio transmission. His eyes filled with memories. I still remember the voice. He closed his eyes for a second. Stay down. Count to 60. When the shooting stops, move east. Michael opened his eyes again. When we reached safety, the entire enemy compound was burning. He looked directly at Eva. We never found the person who did it. Eva lowered her eyes slightly. Some missions aren't meant to be remembered. Michael shook his head. No. They're meant to be honored. Sarah suddenly laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. She looked around the room. Mr. Vincent. You can't seriously believe my sister was involved in some secret military operation. No one laughed with her. No one even looked at her. Every eye remained fixed on Eva. The retired general slowly stepped closer. His face had turned pale. He looked at Eva's wrist. Though the tattoo was covered again, he already knew what he'd seen. His voice became almost a whisper. It can't be. He looked toward Michael. Are you thinking? Michael nodded once. Very slowly. The general turned back toward Eva. His military instincts took over. Without another word, he straightened his posture, placed both heels together, raised his trembling right hand, and rendered a perfect military salute. The entire conference room froze. Not one person breathed. Because if a decorated four-star general was saluting an executive secretary, then she had never been an executive secretary at all. The sharp sound of the general's polished shoes locking together echoed through the silent conference room. His salute never wavered. For several long seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The room that had been filled with confident executives only minutes earlier now looked like a room full of people trying to understand a reality they had never imagined. Sarah blinked repeatedly. She looked at the retired four-star general. Then at Michael Vincent. Then back at Eva. Finally, she laughed nervously. This has to be some kind of misunderstanding. No one answered her. The general slowly lowered his hand but never took his eyes off Eva. I spent 38 years serving this country, he said quietly. I've saluted presidents. I've saluted cabinet members. I've saluted heroes whose names are written into history. He paused. But there are only a handful of people I would salute without being ordered. His voice became even softer. And Viper, 6 is one of them. The words hit the room like thunder. One board member whispered. Viper, what? Another executive looked completely confused. I've never heard that name. You're not supposed to, the general replied. It's a name that was never meant to exist outside classified walls. Sarah slowly shook her head. No. She looked at Eva. Tell them. Tell them this is a joke. Eva remained calm. She didn't look proud. She didn't look embarrassed. She simply stood there with the same quiet expression she had worn since the meeting began. Michael finally spoke. There are operations that never appear in history books. There are people who save lives and disappear before anyone can thank them. He looked at Eva with genuine respect. I believe I'm standing in front of one of those people. Sarah felt her legs weaken. This can't be happening. She looked around desperately, hoping someone would agree with her. No one did. One of the cybersecurity directors cleared his throat. So. He looked toward Eva. Everything she pointed out in the proposal. The retired general nodded. She wasn't speaking as an analyst. She was speaking as someone who's lived through those situations. The finance director slowly closed Sarah's presentation. I suddenly don't feel qualified to argue with any of her recommendations. A few nervous laughs escaped the room, but they disappeared almost immediately. The atmosphere had completely changed. The same people who had ignored Eva when she walked into the room were now looking at her with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Sarah slowly stepped toward her sister. You. Her voice trembled. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Eva looked at her for a long moment before answering. Would it have changed anything? Sarah opened her mouth. But no words came out. Eva continued quietly. When people want to believe you're insignificant, they usually don't ask questions. They create answers. Sarah lowered her eyes. Every family dinner flashed through her mind. Every sarcastic comment. Every comparison. Every time she had laughed at Eva's simple clothes. Every time she had called her a failure. Every birthday. Every holiday. Every insult. She remembered them all. And suddenly, she wished she could forget every single one. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. Eva studied her sister's face. For the first time in years. Sarah wasn't speaking from arrogance. She was speaking from regret. Real regret. Eva smiled gently. You don't owe me an apology because I was Viper 6. Sarah looked confused. You owe yourself one. For believing someone's job title tells you who they are. The room became silent once again. Those words seemed to reach everyone sitting around the table. Michael slowly walked toward Eva. I owe you an apology as well. She looked at him. I hired you believing you simply wanted a quiet administrative position. Michael smiled faintly. I never imagined I had entrusted my schedule to someone who once protected my life. Eva gave a small smile. I was very good at organizing difficult situations. For the first time that day, the room laughed together. Not at Eva. With her. The tension finally eased. Michael extended his hand. It would be an honor if you accepted a different position. Several executives looked at one another. Was he really about to do this? I'd like you to become our senior strategic security advisor. The room immediately broke into applause. Not because Michael had offered the position, but because everyone knew she had already earned it. Eva looked at his outstretched hand. Then she smiled politely. I'm grateful for the offer. Michael waited. But, she continued, I'm afraid I'll have to decline. The applause faded. Michael looked surprised. May I ask why? Eva glanced around the conference room. For the first time, every person there was truly listening. When you've spent years living under different names, wearing different faces, and saying goodbye to people who never knew who you really were, you begin to appreciate ordinary life. She looked at the notebook still resting in her hand. I enjoy taking notes. I enjoy drinking coffee without wondering whether it's poisoned. A few people smiled. I enjoy walking into work without carrying a weapon. The room grew quiet again. And for the first time in a very long time, I enjoy being invisible. No one argued with her. Because every person in that room suddenly understood something. Peace can be the greatest reward after surviving war. Michael slowly lowered his hand. I understand. Then, with complete sincerity, he said, if you ever need anything, my door will always be open. Eva nodded. Thank you. She picked up her notebook and her handbag. As she walked toward the conference room doors, everyone instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path without anyone asking them to. The same people who had barely noticed her when she entered now watched her leave with silent respect. Sarah stood frozen. As Eva passed beside her, she stopped for just a moment. Without anger. Without bitterness. She leaned closer and spoke softly enough that only Sarah could hear. Some snakes hide in forests. She smiled. And some hide inside boardrooms. Sarah swallowed hard. Eva's smile widened ever so slightly. The difference is that I've spent my entire life hunting both. She gently adjusted her bag over her shoulder. Then she walked through the doors without looking back. The doors closed behind her with a quiet click. For several moments, no one inside the conference room moved. Finally, one young executive broke the silence. I'll never judge another person by their title again. The retired general nodded. That's the smartest thing anyone has said all afternoon. Michael walked back toward the enormous glass windows overlooking Manhattan. He watched the tiny figure of Eva disappear into the crowd far below. Millions of people filled the streets of New York. Most would never know that one of the nation's greatest unsung heroes had just walked past them carrying nothing more than a notebook and a handbag. And perhaps that was exactly how she wanted it. Because true legends rarely ask to be recognized. They simply do what is right. Then quietly disappear before anyone realizes they were ever there. So the next time you meet someone who seems ordinary, someone whose job title doesn't sound impressive, someone who sits quietly while everyone else competes to be noticed, remember Eva Clark. Because the strongest people often have the least to prove. And sometimes, The most extraordinary heroes are hiding behind the simplest smiles.